The Man in the Rain. The rain poured like a sheet of silver sorrow, cascading from the heavens and soaking the streets of downtown Los Angeles. It was one of those rare raw days in the city where even the constant buzz of traffic seemed to pause in reverence to the weather's heavy mood. Water pooled at street corners, gushing past clogged drains and slipping between the cracks in the sidewalks that bore witness to countless untold stories. Jack sat on one of those sidewalks, crouched beneath a tattered blanket. The thin material clung to his shoulders, unable to keep the cold from sinking deep into his bones. His hands, scared and calloused, trembled slightly, not just from the chill, but from something deeper, something that had settled inside him over the years like a permanent winter. He was invisible to most who passed. People rushed past him, their umbrellas like small shields keeping them from seeing what they didn't want to acknowledge. But Jack saw them. Every face, every hurried footstep, every lowered gaze. He wasn't angry anymore. He had long since surrendered to the silence that came with being overlooked. Jack hadn't always been this way. He was a former Marine, once strong and full of purpose. He had served his country, stood in the most dangerous places on earth, and returned with the kind of scars no one could see. PTSD, the quiet enemy, took more from him than the battlefield ever could. When his mother died, and his VA support fell through, it only took one bad month to lose his apartment, then his job, then everything. Now, the city was his home, the sidewalk was his bed, and dignity, that had become something he learned to ration like food. But today was different. Keanu Reeves walked briskly down the sidewalk, a coffee in one hand, his hood pulled over his head as the rain continued its assault. Unlike most celebrities, Keanu preferred to walk alone. No entourage, no flashy car. He liked feeling the world under his feet, even in the rain. He was returning from visiting an old bookstore tucked into a forgotten alley, one of the places he liked for its quiet. He bought a book of poetry by Rainer Maria Rilke and was eager to read it over tea. He moved like a man at peace, but fate had other plans. As he neared the corner of 5th and Main, he spotted something that made him pause. A figure, motionless, hunched, a man completely soaked, holding a sign made from a ripped cereal box. Just $1. Please. Keanu stopped. For a full 3 seconds, he simply stood there, letting the rain fall around him. Then he walked over. Jack didn't notice the man approaching at first. Most people didn't. When Keanu stopped in front of him, Jack looked up, not with hope, but with the hollow look of someone who had been rejected too many times. "Excuse me," Jack mumbled, voice raspy, barely audible through the rain. "Can you spare just $1?" Keanu looked at him for a long moment. And then he sat down, right there, in the rain, on the cold, wet concrete beside Jack. The act alone was enough to stun Jack. No one had even looked him in the eye in weeks. Now this stranger was sitting next to him like an old friend. Jack blinked. "You okay, man?" Keanu smiled softly. "I should be asking you that." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The rain softened as if listening. "You asked for $1, Keanu said finally. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I hate doing it. I just wanted to get a hot coffee. Warm my hands. It's dumb." "It's not dumb," Keanu replied. "It's human." Jack studied him. There was something familiar about the man's voice, his face, but he didn't connect the dots just yet. "You ever been this low?" Jack asked quietly, ashamed of himself for asking. Keanu looked out at the rain, his jaw tightening. "Lower than I like to admit." There was a silence, a weight shared. "You know," Keanu added, "I lost my best friend to leukemia. Lost my child before she was born. Lost the woman I loved in a car crash. Some days, I didn't want to go on. I've had money. I've had fame. But I've also had emptiness." Jack stared, the pieces clicking together in his mind. "Wait a minute. "You're Keanu Reeves." Keanu chuckled, not surprised. "I was wondering when you'd figure that out." Jack suddenly felt even more embarrassed. He tried to sit up straighter, wiped the dirt off his coat, but it only smeared. "Sorry, man. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Keanu interrupted. "You asked for $1. You didn't ask me for a photo. You didn't try to scam me. You asked for help. That takes guts." Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. Keanu reached into his coat. Instead of pulling out $1, he pulled out his wallet and handed Jack a $100 bill. Jack's eyes widened. "No, no way. That's too much." "It's not," Keanu said gently. "What's too much is pretending you don't matter. You do." Tears welled up in Jack's eyes. His throat tightened. He couldn't speak. But Keanu wasn't done. "I want to do more," he said. "But only if you're okay with it." Jack wiped his face. "More." Keanu looked at him with sincere eyes. "You're a veteran. You served this country. And you've been forgotten. That's not okay. I've got resources. Friends. I can help you get off this street." Jack didn't know what to say. No one had offered him anything more than loose change in years. This was beyond shocking. This was life-changing. A stranger's hand. A second chance. The $100 bill trembled in Jack's fingers, slick with rain and disbelief. He looked from the money to Keanu's face, searching for some trace of pity, some hidden agenda. But all he saw was sincerity, and still, he couldn't accept it. "I can't take this," Jack whispered, his voice cracking like a man who hadn't spoken truth in a long time. "You can," Keanu said quietly, "and you should." The two men sat shoulder to shoulder on the wet Los Angeles sidewalk. People walked past, huddled under umbrellas, some doing double takes, others completely unaware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. A movie star and a homeless veteran, united by nothing but a rainy day and a shared understanding of pain. "Why are you doing this?" Jack asked, finally breaking the silence. Keanu exhaled, letting the cool air roll out of his lungs. "Because I've been where you are, not on the sidewalk, but in the shadows." He looked up at the clouds, watching as they continued to spill over the city. "There was a time," he continued, "when I couldn't feel anything. After Jennifer died. After my daughter." His voice faltered, but he didn't hide the emotion. "I remember thinking that life wasn't meant for people like me. That happiness was a lie I wasn't allowed to believe in anymore." Jack's jaw tightened. He understood that kind of darkness, the kind that crept into your soul and made a home there. "I didn't think anyone cared," Keanu said. "But then one person reached out. Just one. No fame, no cameras. Just kindness. And it changed everything." Jack looked down at the soaked dollar sign scrawled on his makeshift sign. "You're doing that for me now." Keanu didn't answer. He didn't need to. They sat there for a few more minutes before Keanu stood and held out his hand. "Come with me." Jack blinked. "Where?" "To get coffee. Dry off. Talk. Somewhere warm." Jack hesitated. His instincts told him not to trust it. It felt too good to be real. But something inside him, something long buried beneath hurt and frostbite, flickered to life. Hope. He grabbed Keanu's hand. Inside the cafe. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped into the warmth of a quiet vintage cafe tucked into a corner that only locals knew. It smelled of cinnamon, roasted espresso, and something Jack hadn't experienced in years: comfort. People looked up when Keanu walked in. A few whispered, but he offered them nothing more than a nod before focusing entirely on Jack. They sat near the window. A waitress came by, a young woman with tattoos on her arms and a messy bun holding up a pen. "Oh my God, you're..." Keanu raised a finger gently. "We're just here as two friends, all right." She nodded, instantly understanding. "Coffee?" "Two," Keanu said. "Black, and something warm for him to eat. Your best plate." She smiled. "You got it." Jack sank into the booth like a man who hadn't sat in comfort in years. "I feel like I'm dreaming," he murmured. "You're not," Keanu replied, taking off his jacket and draping it behind him. "You're waking up." The conversation that changed everything. Steam rose from the coffee mugs as the two men talked. At first, Jack was hesitant, unsure of what to share, where to begin. But something about Keanu disarmed him. Not the fame, not the wealth, but the pain behind his eyes, the quiet way he listened. Jack told him about his time in Afghanistan, about the IED blast that shattered his leg and almost took his squad, about the nightmares that followed, and how the system failed him when he returned home. "I went from uniform to invisible," Jack said. "You think a medal meant something?" Keanu nodded. "Sometimes the world forgets its heroes." Jack looked at him. "Why don't you?" Keanu paused. "Because my father walked out when I was 3. I grew up with a mother who worked 3 jobs and still managed to tuck me in every night. She taught me to see people, really see them, not just their situation, their story." Jack's voice broke. "No one's asked me about my story in years." "Well," Keanu said gently, "I'm asking now." The offer. An hour passed. Then 2. And still, Keanu sat, asking questions, listening, never looking at his phone. Finally, Keanu leaned forward, his fingers folded beneath his chin. "I want to help. If you're willing, I can get you into a safe shelter tonight. Not just a bed, a full program. Counselors. Vets who've been through what you have. People who care." Jack's eyes welled up. "But why?" Keanu smiled. "Because you asked me for $1. You asked for help. And I've learned that sometimes the smallest asks lead to the biggest changes." Jack wiped his face again. "And after that?" "After that," Keanu said, "I want to help you find work again. Purpose. I've got friends who run nonprofits for veterans. Good people, if you want it. There's a path out of this." Jack stared out the cafe window. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through. "I do want it," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to ask." "You just did," Keanu said. "A night to remember." That night, Keanu didn't just hand Jack off to a driver and move on. He personally drove him to the shelter. It was a clean, well-lit facility run by Veterans for Veterans. The staff greeted Jack like a brother. No judgment, just open arms. Keanu stayed long enough to walk Jack through intake. He even made sure Jack had clean clothes, a warm blanket, and the direct number of the program's director, a woman named Maria who had lost her own brother to homelessness years before. As Keanu turned to leave, Jack stopped him. "Hey," he said, his voice stronger than it had been all day. "Why me? Out of all the people out there, why did you stop for me?" Keanu thought for a moment. Then he answered, "Because once, someone stopped for me when I didn't deserve it, and it saved my life." Jack nodded, eyes brimming with tears. "You just saved mine." The first night in the light, Jack lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. The soft hum of the shelter's heating system was a lullaby compared to the cold silence of the alleyways he once called home. For the first time in years, he was inside, warm and safe, but peace did not come easily. Sleep was a stranger Jack hadn't spoken to in years. He turned over, clutching the clean blanket around his shoulders. The mattress creaked softly beneath him. His new clothes, simple sweats, and a cotton t-shirt, felt like luxury against skin that had grown used to dirt and weather. His boots had been taken to be cleaned, his hair trimmed, his face washed. But the scars, they didn't scrub away so easily. Echoes in the dark. The light from the hallway spilled in through the half-open door. Jack kept his eyes fixed on it, his breathing shallow. The shelter was quiet now, but his mind wasn't. He heard echoes, not from outside, but from the battlefield of his past. Boom. Screams. A friend yelling his name. His fists clenched under the blanket. He squeezed his eyes shut. It was always the same dream, And just like every other time, Jack jerked awake with a gasp, soaked in sweat. Except this time, he wasn't on concrete or cardboard. He wasn't under a bridge. He was in a bed, and a woman was knocking on the door. "You okay in there?" Maria, the shelter's director, called gently. Jack sat up, wiping his face with both hands. "Yeah, sorry. Just dreams." Maria opened the door slightly and stepped inside. She was middle-aged, tall, and carried herself with the strength of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. Her tone was warm but steady. "We've got people on staff who can help with that. You're not alone here." Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. "I left a welcome packet on the table," she continued, "and a note from Keanu." Jack looked up, surprised. "He left a note?" Maria smiled, said he didn't want to crowd you, just wanted you to know he meant what he said. "The note." Jack walked over to the small table, where a folded paper sat beside a breakfast tray. He opened it carefully. "Hey, Jack. I know this isn't easy. Change never is. But you made a choice yesterday to ask for help. That took more strength than most people realize. I'll check in soon. Take this one day at a time. You matter. Don't forget that." Jack stared at the letter for a long time, the words etching themselves into his chest, like armor. He placed it on the nightstand like it was something sacred, the first step forward. The next morning, Jack joined the others in the dining hall. Veterans of all ages sat around folding tables, talking softly, eating pancakes and eggs. The smell of coffee filled the room like a blanket of normalcy. Jack carried his tray to an empty table and sat alone at first. But within minutes, a man in a wheelchair rolled over and smiled. "Name's Tyler," he said, extending a hand. "Army 0614. You knew." Jack shook his hand. "Yeah, Jack. Marines. Semper Fi. Always faithful." That one exchange was enough to melt a layer of ice. For the first time in years, Jack was among people who understood without asking. Over the next hour, others joined the table. They swapped stories, not war stories, but human ones. Laughter, regrets, inside jokes. Jack didn't say much, but he listened, and slowly something began to shift inside him. Meanwhile, Keanu's quiet work. Across town, Keanu sat in a quiet office overlooking the LA skyline. He wasn't filming that week. He'd cleared his schedule. Not for a press tour. Not for a movie. For Jack. He had already called a few trusted friends, people in the nonprofit world, veterans outreach, and transitional housing programs. His assistant was working on securing a full scholarship for Jack to attend a trauma recovery program tailored specifically for veterans with PTSD. This wasn't charity. It was justice. "You sure about all this?" his assistant, Lena, had asked. Keanu nodded. "I've seen what happens when people don't get a second chance. I'm not letting him fall through the cracks." Lena smiled softly. "You're a good man, Keanu." He didn't respond to the compliment. He never did. Instead, he pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to Maria at the shelter. "How's Jack doing? Let him know I'll be by next week to check in." Quietly. No cameras. Just me. Jack's struggle. Later that evening, Jack sat in a small therapy group. At first, he resisted, sat with arms crossed, head down. But then one man, an older vet named Curtis, told a story about losing everything after returning from Iraq. His family, his job, even his ability to sleep without fear. And when Curtis cried, Jack did too. Not because of the story, but because someone else finally said it first. After the session, Jack stayed behind. The counselor approached him. "You spoke up today," she said gently. "That's big." Jack shook his head. "I didn't say much." "You didn't need to," she replied. "Sometimes just staying in the room is the victory." Maria's update to Keanu. That night, Maria texted Keanu. Jack's doing better. He opened up in group today. He's reading your note over and over. I think you lit a fire in him. Keanu responded with just 2 words. Good. More to come. The man he used to be. The days that followed moved like quiet waves, steady and healing. Jack didn't notice at first, but he was changing. It wasn't in the big ways. He still struggled to sleep, still startled when someone closed a door too loudly, still held shame in the corners of his eyes. But there was something different in his posture, in his breath. For the first time in years, Jack wasn't just surviving. He was beginning to live again. The journal. On the 5th morning at the shelter, Jack found a leather-bound notebook on his nightstand. It wasn't new. The cover was scratched, worn with love. Inside the first page, a note in tidy handwriting read, "Some stories need to be told, not for the world, but for the soul that carries them. Write yours." Jack stared at the note for a long while. Then he opened to the next page and stared at the lines. He didn't write anything that day. But the next morning, he picked up the pen, and a few words came, and then a few more. By the end of the week, the first 10 pages were filled with thoughts he hadn't dared voice aloud. Memories of dusty roads in Kandahar, the laugh of his squad mate, Ortiz, the smell of gunpowder and coffee, the letter he never sent to his sister after their last argument, the face of a girl he once loved, long before the war. Jack was writing not because he wanted to, but because he needed to. Keanu's quiet arrival. One quiet Wednesday morning, the shelter's front door opened, and Keanu stepped in. No sunglasses, no entourage, no press. Maria greeted him with a smile. "You came at the perfect time," she said. "Jack just finished group." "Has he been doing okay?" Keanu asked. "More than okay," Maria replied. "He's been attending every session. Even helped one of the newer vets settle in last night. I think he's starting to believe he belongs somewhere again." Keanu nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." He waited by the hallway as Maria fetched Jack. When Jack stepped into the room and saw him, he froze. "You came," he said, stunned. Keanu smiled. "I said I would." Jack looked healthier. His beard was trimmed, his eyes clearer, his voice stronger. "I didn't think you'd remember." Keanu walked forward and held out his hand. "I never forget people who change my life." They shook hands, and Jack held on a little longer than necessary. "I have something to show you," Jack said. Pages from the past. In the shelter's small rec room, Jack pulled out the notebook. "I've been writing," he said. "Didn't think I could anymore, but once I started, I couldn't stop." Keanu leafed through the pages carefully. The handwriting was rough, but honest, raw, filled with emotion. "These are good," Keanu said softly. Jack looked down. "They're not for anyone to read. Not yet." Keanu nodded. "They're for you. That's what matters." Then Jack turned to the last page he'd written on. "I wrote something I've been avoiding for years," he said. "It's about my sister." Keanu sat back, listening. "She's the only family I had left. We stopped talking after I came back. I was angry, cold, said things I shouldn't have." He took a breath. "She lives in San Diego now. I found her number yesterday. I want to call her, but I'm scared." "What are you afraid of?" Keanu asked. "That she won't want to hear my voice." Keanu leaned forward. "Maybe she's been waiting to." The call. That night, Jack sat alone in the garden behind the shelter. The phone in his hand trembled slightly as he dialed the number he hadn't touched in 7 years. Ring. 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 "Hello." The voice was older, but familiar, softer than he remembered. He almost hung up. "Hello," she repeated. He swallowed hard. "Amy, it's Jack." Silence. Then a breath. And then tears. "Jack. Oh my God, Jack." He could barely speak. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "I thought I lost you." You almost did, he said. But someone found me, gave me a second chance. He looked up at the stars. I want to come see you. If that's okay. Okay, she said, voice shaking. You come home whenever you want. We have a place for you. Jack didn't realize how long he'd been crying until he felt the cold tear trails on his face. A walk with Keanu. Later, Keanu found him still sitting in the garden. You made the call, he said. Jack nodded slowly. She cried. I cried. We talked about Mom. About everything. Keanu smiled. You're not the same man I met on that sidewalk. Jack shook his head. That man was broken. Maybe, Keanu said gently. But even broken things can heal. They walked in silence for a while, side by side under the night sky. Jack didn't feel like a project anymore. He didn't feel like a burden. He felt human. Do you ever think, Jack asked, about how one choice changes everything? Keanu nodded. All the time. I asked you for $1, Jack said. And somehow I found my life again. And I found hope again, Keanu replied. That's the beauty of small moments. They're never as small as they seem. Back in the studio. That weekend, Keanu returned to a film set for a day of pickups. The director, a longtime friend, noticed something different. You look lighter, he said. Keanu smiled. Maybe I am. During lunch, Keanu pulled out his phone and opened Jack's text. Just finished my final session. Amy's driving up next week. Can't believe this is real. Thank you. Gee. He stared at it for a long moment, then opened a new draft on his notes app titled, The Man on the Sidewalk. The surprise visit. A week later, Jack stood at the shelter's entrance, nerves fluttering. A red sedan pulled up, and a woman stepped out, short, with thick curls and a worried look in her eyes. Jack froze. Amy. She hesitated, then ran. They embraced with a force that knocked both of them off balance. Don't ever disappear again, she whispered, clutching his jacket. I won't, he whispered back. Behind them, Keanu stood by the gate, arms folded, watching with a soft smile. Maria joined him. You did that, she said. No, Keanu said. He did. I just sat down in the rain. The rise of a new purpose. The shelter no longer felt like a place Jack was passing through. It felt like a beginning. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, not out of fear or habit, but because the quiet hours had become his sanctuary. He brewed coffee in the community kitchen, humming softly. He no longer hid in corners. He walked with his head up, made eye contact, shook hands, and he wasn't just receiving help anymore. He was offering it. A mentor emerges. Hey Jack, called Tyler, the same wheelchair-bound veteran who had welcomed Jack on his first day. Can you give a hand? We've got a new guy. Fresh out of the street. Looks like I did 6 months ago. Jack nodded and followed him into the intake room. Sitting by the wall was a younger man, no more than 25. Dirty hoodie, hollow eyes, a cut on his lip. Name's Leo, Tyler explained. Marine. 2 tours. Says nothing's been right since. Jack knelt beside the young man, quietly, like someone who knew not to scare away the fragile. Hey Leo. I'm Jack, he said gently. I was you just a few weeks ago. Leo looked up, surprised. You don't look like it. Jack smiled. That's the point. Things change. You'll change. But first, we eat. He offered a hand. After a pause, Leo took it. That simple moment, one hand extended to another, was something Jack had never thought himself capable of just months earlier. Now he was the one lighting torches in the dark. The phone call from Keanu. That night, Jack's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello. Hey Jack, it's Kay. Jack grinned, standing up from his bed like a teenager hearing from a childhood hero. Keanu, you don't use numbers like the rest of us. Keanu laughed. I like to keep it simple. There was a pause. I heard from Maria, Keanu said. She told me about Leo and a couple other guys you've helped. Sounds like you're doing more than just healing. I don't know, Jack replied. Feels right. I see parts of myself in all of them. And if I can do something, I mean, how could I not? Keanu's voice was warm. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. What's up? I've been working with a nonprofit for a while. The Light Project. They help veterans transition into mentorship roles. Paid positions. They run programs at shelters all across the country. I think you'd be perfect for it. Jack blinked. You serious? As Rain, Keanu said. They're flying in next week to meet you, if you're open to it. Jack turned, looking out the window at the moonlight touching the rooftops of the shelter. I'm more than open, he said. I'm ready. The interview. The following week, 2 representatives from the Light Project arrived at the shelter. A man named David and a woman named Sarah, both former military. Both knew how to read people quickly. Jack sat with them in a small room, heart pounding like he was back in boot camp. Sarah began. Tell us your story, Jack. Not the cleaned-up version, the real one. And he did. He told them about the Marines, about losing his squad, about losing himself. He told them about the rain-soaked sidewalk and a stranger who didn't look away. He told them about the journal, the nightmares, the tears, the healing. And most importantly, he told them about Leo, about finding purpose in someone else's survival. When he finished, there was silence. David leaned forward. We don't usually do this on the spot. Jack braced himself. But we'd be idiots not to bring you on. You've got the one thing we can't train. Jack furrowed his brow. What's that? Empathy born from experience. A new title. Peer Specialist. Within days, Jack was hired as a peer specialist for the Light Project. His first assignment, stay right where he was, helping Maria and her staff expand their reach. He was paid. He had a title. He had respect. But more than that, he had a mission. He set up workshops, led group talks, and mentored newcomers. He rewrote his story not with words but with action. And every night, he wrote in the journal Keanu had given him. Only now, the pages weren't just filled with pain. They were filled with hope. An unexpected interview request. One afternoon, Maria approached him, holding her phone. You've got a message, she said, from a journalist. Said she heard about you from someone at the VA center. Wants to do a story. Jack shook his head. I'm not the headline type. Too bad, Maria said, smirking. Because Keanu already said yes. He's joining you for the interview. Jack groaned. Of course he is. The interview. A week later, in a small studio with nothing more than 2 chairs and a camera crew, Jack sat beside Keanu. The interviewer, a young woman with tears already forming after hearing the backstory, adjusted her mic and leaned in. Jack, she began, do you remember what you asked Keanu the day you met? Jack chuckled. Of course I do. I asked him for $1. And what did he give you instead? Jack looked at Keanu, who smiled and nodded for him to answer. He gave me myself back, Jack said. He gave me a mirror I hadn't looked into in years. He didn't just change my life. He reminded me that I had one. Keanu remained quiet, humble as always. Then Jack added, people think heroes wear capes, or that they live in movie scripts. But sometimes, they just sit next to you in the rain. Going viral. The interview hit YouTube like wildfire. From homeless veteran to hero, the man Keanu Reeves helped save racked up over 20 million views in a week. People wrote in from across the world. Veterans in shelters, families who had lost hope, young people struggling with PTSD. Even schools reached out, asking if Jack would speak to students. But Jack didn't care about the fame. He only cared about the impact. A promise to keep. One night, after a long day of mentoring, Jack sat in the shelter garden again. His phone buzzed. A text from Keanu. Proud of you, brother. You turned one moment into a movement. Jack replied, because someone showed me how. When are you coming back? Keanu answered, soon. Got something to show you. Jack stared at the message, wondering what Keanu meant. He had no idea what was coming next. The gift with no price tag. The email arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. Jack had just finished a workshop session with 3 newly arrived vets, one who hadn't spoken a word since arriving, another who still slept in shoes, afraid of being moved, and a third who wept silently as Jack told his own story aloud. He was wiping down chairs when Maria entered the room, holding a printed piece of paper. You might want to sit down, she said. Jack raised a brow. You say that like someone just sent me a subpoena. She smiled. No, but someone sent you a future. Jack sat. Maria handed him the email. It was brief, professional, but what it said changed everything. To Jack R. We are pleased to inform you that Keanu Reeves has made a private philanthropic contribution in your name to the Bridge Forward Foundation. This donation will fully fund the creation of the Jack Reeves Transition Center, a long-term housing and mental health recovery facility for veterans experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County. You are invited to assist in shaping its mission and operations as honorary founder. Mr. Reeves insisted on one condition, that your story becomes someone else's lifeline. Welcome to your legacy. Jack's hands trembled as he read the words. Twice. 3 times. Maria sat quietly beside him, waiting for it to sink in. He named it after me, Jack whispered, voice brittle with disbelief. No, Maria said, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. He named it after the man you became. The return of Keanu. 3 days later, Keanu arrived at the shelter unannounced. As usual, no press, no bodyguards, no spectacle. Jack was in the courtyard, coaching a young vet named Devin on how to fill out job applications. Keanu waited until they were done. Then he approached, hands in his pockets, eyes humble. Hey, he said softly. Got your email. Jack stood slowly. His chest tightened, not with anxiety, but with something else. Gratitude so immense it felt almost unbearable. I don't know what to say, Jack murmured. Keanu nodded. Then don't say anything. Just come with me. The walkthrough. They drove 30 minutes in near silence. Keanu drove a plain black SUV. No tinted windows. Nothing flashy. They pulled into an empty lot surrounded by chain-link fencing. Construction crews stood off to the side, waiting for instruction. Architects in hard hats held blueprints. A large sign stood near the entrance, covered by a tarp. Keanu led Jack to it. You ready? He asked. Jack nodded. Keanu pulled the tarp. Beneath it, in bold, clean lettering, the Jack Reeves Transition Center, a sanctuary for veterans reclaiming their lives. Below that, in smaller words, sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to look away. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Keanu, I'm not. His voice cracked. I'm not a founder. I'm just a guy who asked for $1. Keanu turned to him. No, Jack. You're a man who gave back millions in hope. This building won't just change lives. It'll save them. You earned this. Jack wiped his eyes, shoulders trembling. Why me? Keanu smiled. Because you became the kind of man people can believe in. The kind I needed when I was lost. A facility with a soul. Keanu walked Jack through the plans. The center wouldn't be just a shelter. It would be a trauma-informed mental health clinic, staffed by professionals and peer counselors. 24/7 housing for up to 50 veterans, each with private rooms and shared community spaces. Job training workshops, including mechanics, carpentry, and culinary arts. A memorial garden dedicated to those who didn't make it back from their own wars, both overseas and internal. Jack stood in front of the foundation trench as workers began pouring concrete. This will outlive me, he whispered. That's the point, Keanu replied. News breaks, But Jack doesn't change. The media got wind of the project despite Keanu's best efforts to keep it quiet. Within 48 hours, headlines lit up social media. Keanu Reeves builds veteran center named after homeless man he helped. $1, one destiny. The story behind the Jack Reeves Center. From Skid Row to saving lives. The man who inspired Keanu. Reporters flooded the shelter with interview requests, book deals, podcasts, even a film producer called. But Jack said no to all of it, at least for now. "I'm not finished becoming who I need to be," he told Maria. The story's still being written. Back at the shelter, Jack remained in his role as peer specialist, even as construction began. He spent nights mentoring, days writing, and weekends helping Keanu quietly visit other shelters in the area, donating anonymously, listening to the ignored, learning where help was needed most. Leo, the young Marine Jack had once mentored, had now become Jack's assistant. "I saw you on the news," Leo said. "Can't believe it." Jack smiled. "Believe it, and then help me do something with it." A letter from a stranger. One night, Jack received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. "Dear Jack, I'm not a vet. I'm not even American. But I saw your interview online. I've been struggling with addiction for years. Watching you talk about your pain, not hide from it, gave me courage. I checked myself into rehab today. First time. All because of one line you said. Sometimes you just need one person to sit with you in the rain. Thank you for being that person for me, without ever knowing my name." Jack stared at the letter for a long time. Then he walked to his desk, opened the journal Keanu had given him, and wrote at the top of a new page, "Legacy, the things we leave behind without realizing." A conversation under the stars. Weeks later, Jack and Keanu sat atop the unfinished center's roof, overlooking Lay's twinkling lights. The night air was crisp. The city buzzed in the distance like a world reborn. "Ever think this would be your life?" Keanu asked. Jack exhaled slowly. "I thought I'd die forgotten. Now, I feel like I finally arrived. Not because of the building, or the name, but because I've become someone I'd want my younger self to meet." Keanu nodded. "That's real power." They sat in silence for a while. Then Jack turned to Keanu. "You ever regret it? Sitting down that day?" Keanu smiled. "Not for a second. That sidewalk changed both of us." Jack looked out over the city. "So what now?" Keanu leaned back. "Now, we keep building." The day the doors opened, the morning sky was the color of promise. Soft sunlight broke across Los Angeles as if it, too, knew what this day meant. In a city that had seen too many broken dreams, today was different. Today was about rebirth. The sidewalk where it all began, where Jack had once asked a stranger for a single dollar, was just 2 blocks away from the entrance of the Jack Reeves Transition Center, a symbol of what had grown from that single act of courage. Today, the doors would open. Not just for veterans, but for families. For stories waiting to be rewritten. The grand opening. It wasn't a red carpet event. There were no gold scissors or staged camera flashes. But there were real people. Hundreds gathered. Veterans, families, city officials, volunteers, donors, and people who had followed Jack's story online. They stood shoulder to shoulder, hands in pockets, tissues in hand, many of them in silence as they took in the sight of the brand new building. Clean lines, warm tones, flags fluttered in front. A mural along the side of the center depicted veterans walking forward into the light, one of them looking hauntingly like Jack. Jack stood near the entrance, wearing a simple black jacket, his name stitched into the sleeve. No suit, no spotlight, just present, steady. Next to him stood Keanu Reeves, quietly proud. "You did this," Jack whispered. Keanu shook his head. "We did this." The speech. The ceremony began simply. Maria took the stage first. Her voice trembled only once when she said, This isn't just a building. It's a promise. Then came the mayor, brief and respectful. And finally, Jack was invited to the podium. He hesitated before stepping up. He scanned the crowd, not for cameras, but for faces. Veterans, young men with eyes like his used to be, older men with trembling hands, women holding their children, survivors, fighters, family. He took a deep breath. "I used to think $1 was the most I was worth," Jack began, "because that's what I asked for. That's all I believed I deserved." A hush fell over the crowd. But I was wrong. Not just about myself, but about the world. I believed no one saw me, that I had to be invisible to survive. Then one person sat next to me in the rain and reminded me that being seen changes everything. He paused, his voice steady. "This center isn't about me. It's about you, every one of you who ever felt forgotten. Every soul who served and returned home to silence. This place is proof that no one is too far gone. Not if someone is willing to stop and listen." He looked at Keanu, then back to the crowd. "Thank you for hearing me. Now let's go hear them." Walking the halls. After the speech, Jack personally walked veterans and visitors through the center. He showed them the clinic rooms, each painted in calming earth tones. The bedrooms, small, private, peaceful. The kitchen, already filled with the smell of baked bread. The library, stocked with books donated from across the country. And the Garden of Honor, where a stone path led to a memorial wall etched with the names of fallen soldiers and those lost to homelessness, suicide, and silence. At the very end of the garden sat a single bench, an exact replica of the one from the sidewalk where Jack had once huddled in the rain. A plaque read, "This is where it began." Jack sat on it for a moment alone. Then a voice behind him spoke. "You never told me it would be this beautiful." The reunion. Jack turned. There, standing in the sunlight, was Megan, the girl from long ago. The woman he had loved before the war, before the pain, before the silence. She looked older, wiser, but her smile was the same. Jack stood, stunned. "Megan?" She nodded. "Your sister told me what happened. Sent me the article. I didn't know if I should come." Jack could barely find words. I thought you moved on." "I tried," she said softly. "But some stories don't end. They just pause." He laughed gently. "I'm a mess." She stepped closer. "Maybe, but you're my mess." They embraced. Long. Healing. No words needed. Keanu watched from afar and smiled, then turned, giving them their moment. Keanu's final surprise. As the crowd began to disperse, Keanu approached Jack one last time. "I've got one more thing," he said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Haven't you done enough?" "This one's not for you," Keanu replied, holding out a leather-bound copy of something thick. Jack took it and read the cover. "The Man in the Rain. How $1 Saved 1,000 Lives." By Jack Reeves. He opened it. Every word he had written in his journal was there. Revised. Edited. Organized. "My team helped polish it," Keanu said. "But every word is yours. You told me once you didn't think your story mattered." Jack swallowed hard. "Now," Keanu said, "the world will hear it. A legacy born in rain." The sun dipped low as Jack stood once more on the sidewalk where it all began. Same corner, same city, but everything was different now. He stood taller. He felt stronger. Not because life had gotten easier, but because he had chosen to rise. As he looked around, a familiar figure walked past, a young man in ragged clothes, hoodie pulled low, hands shaking. Jack stepped toward him. "Hey," he said, gently, "you hungry?" The young man looked up, startled. Jack held out a coffee and a sandwich. "You matter," he said. "You might not believe it now, but I know what it's like. And I know what's possible." The young man stared at the food, then at Jack. "Thanks, man," he whispered. Jack sat next to him on the sidewalk. In the fading light, they just sat, two strangers sharing the moment. And somewhere, just a few blocks away, Keanu Reeves smiled as he disappeared back into the crowd, knowing his work here was done. Because real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they just sit beside you in the rain.